jump on this. I'm sure we'll have some more people that are coming in. Thank you all for coming to the second part of surviving the IEP maze. This is probably the most confusing, convoluted, and difficult piece, the process. So we're going to take it from beginning up to the IEP meeting. A little bit of housekeeping first. As always, I am available through my webpage for complimentary consults. I'm available through my Facebook. If you are a social media person, please don't hesitate to hop on. I also have my live community going, my Pathway to Hope. And if you just want to say hi or have some questions, feel free to contact me as well through my complimentary consult or Judy at ADHDcoachconnect.com. So looking ahead just quickly to part 3, which I will be presenting next week on Monday. That's the, I should say the end piece, but in essence it's not, because we want to make sure that we continue to follow through and ensure that our children are getting the right support. But it will be the end of my 3 parts. So that is the infamous, dreaded IEP meeting. We'll talk about how to get what you want, what your child needs, how to build a very positive relationship with school personnel, and how and when one can make changes. Today, though, with the process, we're going to begin at the very beginning of that process when we suspect something that needs to get a bigger look. We're going to provide to you how long it will take to go through the process, what's required from you as a parent, from the school, and your child. What you need to know going through the process, and then ultimately how we get it implemented and then manage it. Again, my disclaimers, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a parent advocate, although I often hook parent advocates up with parents who are in need. Sometimes I work with them on the coaching aspect. I do also go with parents to IEP meetings, 504 meetings, etc. But the parent advocate is also trained in the legalities of it much more than I. So I often get my colleagues, and they're very, very good people to have by your side when you're going through this process. I'm also not a district representative. And the last piece, which is really, really important, is I'm not the parent of a special needs child. And the laws really are up to your interpretation. If you have an attorney with you, fabulous. A parent advocate will help guide you. But the federal laws, the state laws are really picky about saying that it's up to your interpretation. So last week, whether you were here or not, I just want to review quickly because this is what we're diving into. The IEP and the 504. So our IEP process, remembering that our IEP is under IDEA, Individual Disabilities Education Act. It is for students anywhere from the ages of 3 to 21, and it provides that individual supplemental educational services. So most of the time with an IEP, we are looking at either some severe or multiple handicaps or challenges, and we may be also looking at additional services, speech, adapted phys ed, things like that. Behavioral intervention plan may also be involved. The 504, a little easier, doesn't involve the process we're going to go through today, but it does mean to qualify for that under Section 504, we need to have a physical or mental impairment which limits one or more major life activity, have a record of it, such as a diagnosis, and regard it as an impairment. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So again, our IEP is under IDEA, 3 to 21 years of age. It ensures your child for a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. That could be the resource room, that could be a regular classroom, that could be a inclusion type classroom. It is in place from infancy to their 22nd birthday. If they are going to college, that's when it switches into a 504 if it meets the requirements. Now, I did provide you for a link here. If you can click this when we get the, I see it doesn't allow me to click it today. So let me open that up again and see if you can see this. Bear with me just 1 second. Not sure why it's doing that. All the testing one does, and we still struggle. I don't think you're going to be able to see this, but if you can open, even on a link on your computer, the Ohio ETR process chart will be extremely helpful to kind of look at it. It will look like a convoluted piece of maze, but that's what I'm going to work through. Now, note that I said Ohio. The federal laws obviously have no border lines between the states. However, the state laws can vary somewhat. They will be similar, but not totally the same. I'm going to try and go back to this and see if I can get so that you can see this chart. I'm not sure that you can. I don't think that one's going to work. So we'll just work our way through this. Okay. So from the very beginning, we have to find out if our child qualifies. And that qualification, again, under IDEA, for an IEP, child must be evaluated for eligibility under one or more of these 13 categories. So if there is some type of suspicion that any of these may be evaluated or may be present, then there may be reason to request that initial evaluation. In order to do that, it should be in writing. It should be a request if you think your child may qualify, and if you have proof at home through documents, grades. Sometimes teachers can't pull the whole document, they'll just keep the grades. So any kind of proof where you start to see some things showing up and surfacing, you want to try and keep that information. Because knowing that if we go back to this slide, speech or language may or may show up in some type of test. Visual impairments, we've seen this a lot where we don't know why the child is struggling, and then we realize that he's sitting in the back of the room and has a visual impairment. ADHD, ADD, all of those, you may have a child who has some great grades. However, they are struggling with executive functions. So any kind of proof that you as a parent can have, can keep, can present is fabulous. Remember, you are the one who's going to advocate for your child. So put this in writing. It should be to the principal, to the psychologist. I like to send them to all of the above. I don't like to keep anyone out. So I would say go right ahead and request that. So that's the initial request. It then takes 30 days. Yep, 30 days already. And in that 30-day period, you may see the teacher put together what we call initial interventions through RTI, which is a response to intervention. This process is used, I would say, countrywide, but not in every district, used by educators to help students who are struggling. It's not just for special needs, but is in several levels, and I'll show you what we're looking at here. This is what we call the RTI pyramid, and you'll notice down here, Tier 1, there are universal interventions. This may be extra time. This may be guided notes. This may be anything like that. It's going to cover the majority of the class. So in a sense, we're preventing and being very proactive in helping students and accommodate maybe those executive functions who, by the way, do not mature until their late 20s or 30s. But then if we still have a group of students, one or more, that fall into the second tier, in other words, they need more support, they would be directed and referred to an RTI team. So these secondary interventions would be the yellow that we see in here, kind of a cautionary. They maybe are at-risk kids. They may have some disabilities. They maybe are ADD. They may be visually impaired, but don't necessarily require the extensiveness or the use of the IEP. So additional support would be for these students. And this is all within the classroom itself, the regular classroom. If we still need additional support, this would be more of your individual students, perhaps with the IEPs, 504s even, that may need to be pulled out, that are going to require a much higher intensity of support. And that's our Tier 3. So in many, many school districts, this is already in place, and this would probably go into effect prior to that IEP. So you put in a request. In the meantime, if RTI is in effect in that district, perhaps it's referred and they bump it up a tier or two. But the school itself has to determine if it thinks it's warranted to do the testing. The testing is inexpensive, costs $1,500 on up to $3,000, somewhere in there, and that's the cost of a school. So they're going to look at this very, very closely to see whether they do suspect that disability. So they have 30 days. So already we're a month later, and the only support that may be available would be the RTI, if it's in effect, or individual accommodations just done by the teachers because they recognize it, and that's what good teachers do. So 30 days you're going to meet, and it usually doesn't happen in 10, 20, 25. It's usually 30 days. They're going to request, they're going to send out a prior written notice to you as a parent for you to meet and get your consent, or to tell them that they don't believe that it warrants testing. So we're waiting, first of all, 1 month. If you give your consent, then the testing will begin. And the testing is usually a 3-day type um, of testing done by the school psychologist. And this type of testing may involve IQ. It may involve you filling out information through the Connors. It will require the teacher. It should require information from all aspects. Now, we've already gone 30 days. This evaluation team report, most notably called an ETR or an MFE, which is multi-factored evaluation. The psychologists will be doing this and putting their findings together. Guess what? They get another 30 days to do that. Excuse me, another 60 days. So now let's say you start this process in October. By the end of November or whenever you started it is just the consent. The testing results won't be available to the beginning of the second semester after the holiday break. So it's very, very lengthy. So when you are requested to come back after the 60 days, we have at that point a review of the evaluation team report, a review of the ETR. It will be determined whether they're eligible for any type of special needs support, whether they're not eligible, or if you as a parent can agree or disagree. The schools will often want you to sign something quickly, and you have every right not to. So I encourage you to take a step back, take any information home, and process it on your own, or bring a parent advocate or someone who is knowledgeable in that area with you. So if they are eligible, we determine after, 30 days, consent, 60 days for testing. You meet again then. If the school has warranted that they meet one or more of those 13 disabilities, guess what? Another 30 days is allowed for the IEP to be put together and a design of the program for your child. So if we go that course and get that IEP together, we're really looking at close to 120 days, 4 months. So the reason I bring that up is, yes, it's a lengthy process. No, it probably won't be changed anytime soon. But the key is that if there is suspicion, that we don't let it go too long, because it takes so long to get that support. The other piece of that is how your child views it. And with a smaller child, a younger child, usually it's not that noticeable. As you get into the middle schools and into the high schools, there may be a pushback from it. They don't want to be different than anyone else. But with a good intervention specialist, there are many, many ways to work around that so that they get the support, they start to embrace it, and they see that it is extremely helpful for them. The second possibility is that the school finds that they're not eligible. They may be borderline, but as far as the testing goes, they do not qualify for any type of special education. So you as a parent can agree or disagree with that. And many parents don't realize that they can disagree. And if you do disagree, you may request an independent evaluation. It's called an IEE, and it can be from an independent evaluator, and the school is required to pay for that. Some parents choose to pay for it on their own, but the school is required to pay for that. So I actually have a client right now who was basically pushed as hard as they could to sign an IEP, or actually to get rid of the IEP, excuse me. And now with a parent advocate, they are actually not accepting the findings and feel that there should be some type of special needs support. So again, the time goes on, but you want what's best for your child and you want the right support. So again, if we do have an IEP that goes into process, the total amount of time that it could and it does seem to take is 4 months, 120 days overall to get support. Then there may be changes in scheduling. Your child, depending on their age, has to be accepting of it so that this is useful for them. On the 504, I just wanted to put this in here. Although I went through the process with an IEP, it is not as lengthy. The 504, again, puts your child on a level playing field, but in the regular classroom. There's 2 criteria. They must have a disability, and it must interfere with their ability to learn in a general education classroom. They're not going to be pulled out unless they put it as an accommodation. So that being said, again, the ages of 3 and 22 years. And we had said that it was defined as having a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. Well, what does that mean exactly? Has a record of such an impairment, so that would mean some type of diagnosis, and it's regarded as an impairment. So here's our 3 pieces to a 504. Excuse me. Let me jump ahead of myself here. So is it an impairment? Is it a major life activity? And does it substantially limit their ability to learn? Usually you can get the 504 put together with a meeting with the counselors. If there's a committee that is involved, bring a diagnosis. You can put together accommodations, and we can get it up and running within a few days. Obviously, that is so different than the 120 days it will take for an IEP. So with this 504, there's not a referral needed, but the school still has to agree with it. And again, any type of outside diagnosis is really kind of the trigger that will put this together. There's no additional testing. They'll look at doctor's reports, tests, observations, teacher reports, etc. But I've seen these put together in just a few days. They'll be in the general classes. There's no additional testing. If parent disagrees, they would just have to go through a due process, usually through the Ohio Civil Rights. So you would not necessarily be able to go out and get an independent evaluation as you would with an IEP. They're in general classes. They may have accommodations, which is really the purpose of the 504. And they're reevaluated every year, or if there's a significant change in placement. However, the school will call the parent in every year. But if you want changes, and this is a huge point that I don't think I have written down, if you want changes in that IEP or that 504 at any time between meetings, you may make these changes. You just have to request them. There's actually a section right on the front page of the IEP that says amended, and that's for any changes. So it's very, very important that people know it's a living document. It doesn't just go from September 12th on one year to September 11th on the next year. There can be changes anywhere in between that. So you as a parent have that right. Your child has that right as well. Again, just some more jargon on here in case people needed it. We've got IDEA for IEPs, free and free education with placement, IEP, least restricted environment? Is that your general classroom? Is that being pulled out? Related services, speech, hearing, etc. Transition services, here's your ETR and MFE. So those are your testing documents. This is your behavior intervention plan. And your IEP team always involves the parent. Always. It is usually a psychologist, counselor. It would be a principal or assistant principal. It may be additional teachers, regular or special needs, but always centers around you as a parent. Okay, if you have any other questions at this point, I will be sending out, and I apologize that I couldn't pull up that particular form, the ETR process chart. So I would pull that up if you would. When I send this out, I'll make sure that's included. Because again, it looks convoluted. It was probably easier going through this than not having that in front of us because there are multiple arrows going in 15 different directions. So it is a little bit confusing. But know that you've got 120 days before an IEP can go into effect. A 504 can be done fairly quickly. So it's not unusual to see 504s go to IEPs. And for IEPs, as they get older, juniors and seniors in high school, we start to build on those advocacies and we start to take away some of those accommodations. Not all of them. We want to keep them on that level playing field. This recording and the slides will go out on a YouTube as well over the next few days. They'll be available for about a week to all those that weren't able to make it. And we will also, there's tons of resources here for you all as well. The rights law is important, understanding special education, the IEP process explained. All of those are very, very effective, but remember, it does fall on you for interpretation of the law, unless you have an attorney by your side, and certainly helps if you have someone like a parent advocate, or even myself as an ADHD coach. I was an intervention specialist, so I do understand both sides of this. That's about our 30 minutes and our explanation of the process. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them down in the chat box, and I will wait a few minutes and respond to them. In the meantime, again, you will get this from me so that you have the recording available. If you have a complimentary consult where you want to have a conversation with me, you may click on that, click on my website, like my Facebook. My Facebook has a ton of strategies each and every day. So I appreciate you being here and joining me and taking time out from 12 to 12:30. We will do part 3 next Monday, same time, same place. And again, I'll wait a few minutes for any other additional requests or questions and respond to those.